Good morning, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It is called McDuff Lives. And we're continuing our occasional morning shows here on Monday morning. I like to read, and when I've got a week full of guests lined up, it's hard for me to fit in time that I can actually do some reading. And the reason I like to read is because I think that the books really are the best places to get things. And people that have been writing books are experts, and they've got a whole lot of study behind them before they write a book. I know this because I just wrote my first book. It's a biography of my dad, and it took me years, literally years, and agony to try to get all of those things together. But I did get the book written. It's called McDuff Lives, and it's on Amazon and Kindle if you'd like to get a copy. If you want to support my work, that's a good way to do it. Just spend $9.99 at Amazon, and actually 70% of that goes to the authors on the Kindle side. The deal's not so good on the paperback side, but I'm going to try not to publish the paperback version until I've had a chance to work with Andy and fine tune what we can do without using Amazon. Nevertheless, for Amazon, for me to get the book out, I've gone ahead and published it on Kindle. Sold 19 of them so far. I got a monthly report, my first monthly report, and so that's great. Um, it does support the channel. It's better than buying a super chat on YouTube. Not if you not that you can do that here. They've demonetized my channels long ago. But that's my book, and my recommendation is that um, we got to keep libraries and books going, and good libraries, not libraries full of reruns of junk videos, but real libraries with real books, biographies, histories, literature, the kind of thing that you're supposed to be able to just dive into and forget yourself for a while. So let's see if we can do that with this book by Carl Oglesby this morning. I'm on the fourth part of it, the way I've been reading it, and so far I've chosen to read everything um, up to page 33. That's where we are right now. I'm going to keep going because we're getting ready to get to the Galen organization. But before we get there, we're going to talk about Richard Nixon and how did we get stuck with that guy? So let's let Carl Oglesby take over here. Let me straighten out my oops for a second. I need to do this. Hang on. Oops. Cancel that. And Chrome tab, and there we are. Excellent. Okay. So when we left off, we were talking about President Roosevelt's approval of Operation Underworld. Roosevelt made the mafiosi all but official masters of the U.S. East Coast docks and gave implicit protection to their activities. With his instructions to Patton in 1943, he restored the mafia to power in Sicily. When he sent Lansky to Batista in 1944, he paved the way for the spread of syndicate influence throughout the Caribbean and Central America. When he directed the CIA to use syndicate thugs at Marseille in 1945, he licensed the heroin factories that would be feeding the American habit into a contagion virtually unchecked over the years of the Cold War. One can easily enough sympathize with Roosevelt's desire to strike at the Axis powers with whatever weapons came at hand, especially to do something to protect the docks. But we must also judge his acts by their longer term consequences. Certainly, we cannot say it is all Nixon's fault if during his novice and formative years in political administration, when he and baby Rebozo may have found themselves in a relationship around black market tires in wartime Miami, he should have come upon the idea FDR sponsored that some crooks were patriotic, just as though a few purchased gestures of patriotism could make crime itself legitimate. Fine word, legitimate. Operation Underworld is one of the roots of Operation Gemstone. Roosevelt is one of the authors of Watergate. The derivation of Nixon, tricky, is perhaps the most despicable president this nation has ever had. He was a cheat, a liar, and a crook, and he brought my country, which I love, into disrepute. Even worse than abusing his office, he abused the American people. So says Earl Warren. Earl Warren, of course, abused the American people too by lending his name to the fraudulent Warren Commission. But he was one of the good Freemasons, right? He went along with the narrative because he thought that was the best thing for the country, but he didn't like Richard Nixon. Guess Nixon's taint of criminality was stinking around, the upper class Freemasons like Earl Warren. Nixon is commonly supposed to have been introduced to Bebe Rebozo by Richard Danner, the courier and connector who left the FBI to become city manager of Miami Beach at a time when it was under the all but open control of the mob. Danner first met Nixon at a party thrown in Washington in 1947 by another newly elected congressman, George Smathers. Smathers was by that time already an intimate friend and business partner of Rebozo and a friend of Batista. When Nixon vacationed in Havana after his 1952 election to the vice presidency, syndicate-wise Danner used his clout with Lansky's man Norman Roughhouse Rothman to get gambling credit at the Sans Souci for Nixon's traveling companion, Dana Smith. We recall Dana Smith as the manager of the secret slush fund set up to finance Pat Nixon's cloth coats, the, the exposure of which led to the famous Checkers TV speech during the 1952 campaign. Smith dropped a bundle at the Sans Souci and left Cuba without paying it back. Safe in the States, he repudiated the debt. That infuriated Rothman. Nixon was forced to ask the State Department to intervene on Smith's behalf. It is poetically satisfying to imagine Nixon and Rebozo meeting through Danner when Danner re-enters in the next to last act of Watergate with the $100,000 from Hughes, which he only seems to have been able to only he seems to have been able to deliver. We may sense a wheel coming full circle. But there is the possibility also that Rebozo and Nixon actually connected in Miami in 1942, and it is almost certain that they knew of each other then, as will emerge. Here are the fragments with which we reconstruct Rebozo. A. He is associated with the anti-Castro Cuban exile community in Florida. B. An all-Cuban shopping center in Miami is constructed for him by Polizzi Construction Company, headed by Cleveland mafioso Al the Owl Polizzi, listed by the McClellan Crime Committee as one of the most influential members of the underworld in the United States. C. His Key Biscayne Bank was involved in the E.F. Hutton stock theft, in which the mafia fenced stolen securities through his bank. Rebozo's will to power appears to have developed during the war when he made it big in the used tire and retread business. Used tire distributors all over the country, of course, were willing and unwillingly turned into fences of mafia black market tires during the war. Rebozo could have been used and still not know it. He was born in 1912 in Florida to a family of poor Cuban immigrants, was ambitious, and by 1935 had his first gas station. By the time the war was over, his lucrative retread business had turned him into a capitalist, and he was buying up Florida land. Before long, he was buying vast amounts of it in partnership with Smathers and spreading thence into the small loans business, sometimes called loan sharking. From lending, he went into insuring. He and Smathers insured each other's business operations. His successes soon carried him to the sphere of principalities and powers, the likes of W. Clement Stone of Chicago and the aerosol king, Robert Abplanalp, both of whom met Nixon through him. Also during the war, Rebozo was navigator in a part-time military air transport command crew that flew military transports to Europe full and back empty, which some find a minder bender-esque detail. You guys are familiar with Minder Bender, Milo Minder Bender of Catch 22. And what a fabulous book that is by Joseph Heller. And you really should see the movie if you haven't seen it. John Voight is the actor that plays Milo Minderbender. Alan Arkin is just absolutely tremendous as Yossarian, and a number of remarkable character actors that we love from those movies in the 60s and 70s. Uh, Richard Benjamin is, I don't know if you like him or not, but he's in it, and a number of other great actors. It's a great story and well told about the insanity that war brings and the corruption and the military industrial complexes, unstoppable pace that, hey, you got to fly missions. And that's what we're there for. And you lose planes, you get another plane, but you fly the damn mission. What for? They were bombing innocent cities and towns. Well, anyway, back to the book. And Nixon, and the theme here is, what do you expect if President Roosevelt went into the business with the mafia during World War II, then how can you not expect up and coming politicians to do business with the mafia? The point well made by our author Carl Oglesby back in 1976. That's why I find this book so fascinating. He's really nailed it a long time ago. And how about the Aerosol King? Wonder whether he has anything to do with people like um, Frank Olson, who was studying aerosolizing LSD and other mind control drugs when he himself was hit with mind control drugs and apparently murdered by the same people he was working with. Yes, the CIA. That's what McDuff's first channel was. And you guys that have been with me all that time, you know that McDuff, Kennedy's man to smash the CIA, was the name that I put on my channel when I first started it. And we had nearly 12,000 subscribers when YouTube struck it. And without any real reason, they just took it down. So lost 900 videos. Yeah, I know how George Webb feels about losing videos. But with YouTube having a virtual monopoly on the eyes of the world here, that you want to learn something, they go to YouTube now. So let's try to stay here. Almost lost it this morning, but I filed an appeal, and believe it or not, they actually granted my appeal, and that's why we're here today. So if you get a strike, you might as well appeal it. Maybe you'll win. I don't know how I won, but there you go. Good early afternoon to you, David. Mom with bulldogs, love cat, Joseph, Heidi, Corky, and A. Hello, A Baker. So yeah, we're back. But for how long, we don't know. You can get squashed anytime. So we're also on BitChute now. We've got Catherine, our wonderful, wonderful scheduler, who keeps our schedule and keeps our website, screamingospreys.com, up to date. If you haven't been there lately, be sure and visit. During the first year of the war, before going into the Navy, Nixon worked in the interpretations unit of the legal section of the tire rationing branch of the Office of Price Administration, OPA. Investigator Jeff Girth had discovered that 3 weeks after Nixon began this job, his close friend to be, George Smathers, came to federal court for the defendant in the case, United States versus Standard Oil of Kansas. U.S. Customs had confiscated a load of American made tires re entering the country through Cuba in an attempt to circumvent national tire rationing, i.e., bootleg tires. Smathers wanted to speed up the case for his client, and so he wrote to the OPA for a ruling. His letter must have come to Nixon, who, OPA records show, was responsible for all correspondence on tire rationing questions. It was therefore Nixon's business to answer Smathers. Especially since this was the first knock on the door, it would be nice to know what Nixon said and how the matter was disposed of. Unfortunately, reports Girth, most OPA records were destroyed after the war. The court file for this case is supposed to be in the Atlanta Records Center, but a written request submitted to the clerk has not been honored despite the usual 1 week response time. Written questions submitted to President Nixon and Bebe Rebozo have also gone unanswered. Among the relevant questions is whether Miami was one of the regional offices that Nixon set up. Was this the bending of the twig? And if Rebozo and Nixon actually did meet then, even if only through bureaucratic transactions around the flow of tires, then they met within the sphere of intense syndicate activity at a time when Roosevelt's Operation Underworld had conferred immense prestige and freedom of movement on syndicate activities. Could the Nixon Rebozo relationship escape being affected by FDR's truce between law and crime? Let us spell out this theory of Nixon's beginnings. Prohibition. Organized crime takes over the distilleries industry. Repeal. Bootlegging goes legit, the syndicate thereby expanding into the sphere of legal operations. This is the first big foothold of organized crime in the operations of the state. Cuba Batista. Lansky goes to Cuba in 1934 in search of a molasses source, meets and courts the newly ascendant strongman Batista, stays 3 weeks, and lays plans for developing Havana into the major offshore free zone of stateside organized crime. Cuba playing the role in the Caribbean of Sicily and Corsica in the Mediterranean. World War II. In despair of otherwise securing the physical security of the docks against sabotage, which may or may not have been fascist inspired, Roosevelt accepts a secret arrangement with organized crime. He comforts Luciano in prison and agrees to release him to exile at the end of the war. He generates an atmosphere of coalition with crime for the duration. In that atmosphere, syndicate projects prosper, but one of the smugglers, Kansas Standard, gets too brazen and is caught, perhaps by naive customs officials. Smathers takes the case for the defendant and thus comes into contact with Nixon. Noting Girth's discovery that the records of this case have inexplicably disappeared from the files, noting Rebozo's involvement in the tire business and his rapid enrichment during World War II, and noting Smathers' well-known affection for Cuban associations, we generalize to the straightforward hypothesis that Nixon may have been fused to the syndicate already in 1942. Was his 1944 stint in the Navy a sheep dipping? Look at this rise. 1946, Nixon for Congress. 1948, Nixon for Congress too. 1950, Nixon for Senate. 1952, a heartbeat away. So it is another Dr. Frankenstein story. The Yankees beget in sheer expediency and offhandedness the forces that will later grow strong enough to challenge them for leadership. See, that is key. That is analysis that was done in 1976, and I think it stands the test of time. That in the name of expediency, these, self elevating eggheads of the establishment would do business with organized crime and not even think about the consequences. I don't know. That's one theory. My theory is even more, I think they know about the consequences and they do it anyway. But that's just my opinion. Operation Underworld was the supreme pioneering joint effort of crime and the state, the first major direct step taken toward their ultimate covert integration into the Dallas Watergate decade. I would also make a comment here, which I'm not sure if Carl Oglesby is going to make this point later or what, but I'd like to make it now. And that is when the elites and the criminals are secretly working together. And you have a perfect example of the 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 black nobility in Italy and throughout Europe. Black nobility is includes the heirs of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, and the wealth side of the wealths and Ghibellines in Italy. These are the people that are running Italy now, at least the northern part of it. And the idea that it's both ends against the middle. It's the elites on the top that through making oligarchical deals with one another keep themselves in power, and the criminals on the bottom that make their living by stealing from normal people, and that's how they control the population. These are not random events. This happens over and over again where you have an elite establishment and a criminal element that are working together. I mean, think of the Princess Bride, right? where where Dread Pirate Dan is it's a commit it's a concession. You want to be the Dread Pirate Dan this year? Oh yeah. Well, what's that all about? That's all about the powers that be controlling organized crime and letting organized crime make its living and have a nice life as long as they work together. So the idea that the elites are going to protect us from organized crime should be pretty clear that that's false. That's a myth. The only people that that are going to protect us is us, and that's why we need a middle class. We need a very strong middle class, and it is the middle class that is going down right now with these lockdowns. Because it is. It's that big, big money And in order to get things done efficiently, they are happy to work with the cutthroats at the bottom. Pardon me. Yep, 10% for the big guy. You got it, Jason. That's right. Yeah. So that's a good way to look at the world right now is to say, wait a minute, what happened to we the people? We the people are supposed to be the beneficiaries as well as the controllers of our government. No, we farmed it out. We farmed it out to political parties and to interest groups. And so now we take whatever they give us because we'd rather sit home and watch TV. Well, it's not our fault. We've been brainwashed and psychopped and trained our whole lives to be passive. And now we're coming to a time when the only thing that's going to save us is being active. Love Cat says, I'm shocked by how entrenched eugenics is. I know. People are actually asking the question of, well, would it not be okay if we lost 70% of the population? Wouldn't that be better than what we are doing now? No, no, it's bad. It's terrible. You know, Eh, not only would it be a horrible, horrible thing to go through for the survivors, can you imagine caring for all of these sick people and watching them die? You know, uh, but even if you survive, there's not going to be an economy. There's not going to be anything. There's not going to be any health care. There's not going to be anybody except for you and the people around you. It is the perfect storm that they are trying to create. We do not need this depopulation. All right, now we get to the fun part. I've been looking forward to reading this part because, as you know, Galen and his organization are a major theme of my work. And this is a fresh look at it, once again, from Carl Oglesby, 1976. All right, here we go. The Galen Organization. Recall two generals of World War II. First, General Andrei Vlassoff, a Red Army officer secretly working with an extensive anti-Bolshevist spy ring. He joined up his forces with the advancing Germans during the invasion of the Ukraine, where Russian forces antagonistic to Stalin and anxious to overthrow the Bolsheviks had collected. In other words, the White Russians, right? I mean, we know about White Russians and we understand what that means, that these are the former czarists or perhaps people that were against the czar but against communism also. So it's not necessarily all czarists in the Vlasov army, but as we read um, from Blowback by Christopher Simpson, the Vlasov army was not a noble organization. These were the dregs of the SS and the collaborators. So that's who Vlasov is. We talked about him last time. Vlasov commanded the so-called Army of Liberation, a full division of more or less well-equipped troops fighting under the flag of Great White Russian Reaction for the restoration of the Tsar. And second, General Reinhard Galen, the famous super spy of the same war, master of Hitler's powerful Soviet intelligence apparatus. The practical basis of the great success of Galen's Soviet intelligence system was his relationship to Vlasov. Through Vlassoff, Galen had access to the Russian anti-Bolshevist underground network that had long since penetrated, if not captured, key departments of the Soviet regime. At a moment in their invasion when the Nazis still thought themselves on the brink of triumph, Galen proposed to Hitler that Vlasov be made the head of the forthcoming provisional government. Hitler declined, presumably out of respect for Vlasov's power, but the relationship between Galen and Vlasov and their spy systems remained intact, even after the defeat of the Wehrmacht in the Battle of Stalingrad in the winter of 1942 to 43. By Christmas 1944, Galen had reached the belief that Germany's cause was hopeless. Against the certainty of national defeat, he decided that his only personal choice lay between surrender to the Russians and surrender to the Americans. In April 1945, with the Russian army closing in on Berlin, Galen gathered together with his top aides in a hotel room in Bad Elster, Saxony, to carry out the decisive and most dangerous step of their decision. They stripped their archives of the intelligence information that would be most useful to them in subsequent negotiations. Burning tons of other documents, they stored their basic intelligence cache in 52 crates and with elaborate security measures moved these crates into the Bavarian Redoubt and buried them in a high mountain field called Misery Meadow, overlooked by a chalet which Galen's foresight had long before provisioned. Safe there, with his 40 top aides and his buried spy treasures, Galen settled down to await the Americans. By May Day 1945, the Red Army was in Berlin and Hitler was dead. Well, that's what they say. 3 weeks later, columns of the 101st Airborne moved up the valley below Galen's mountain fortress. Galen's aides descended from the upper slopes to present themselves for capture and arrange an appointment for the capture of their commander, the highest ranking German officer and Hitler's only staff general yet to make his way to safety in American hands. No ceremonies were slighted. One interview followed another. Captured in May, Galen arrived in Washington 3 months later, August 22nd, 1945. Oh, isn't that interesting? We just had an anniversary yesterday. Um, in the uniform of a general of the United States Army. Now that's a sacrilege right there. I don't care. You need to hide people, fine, but don't put him in the U.S. Army. This is a Nazi. Th- this is weird. This is sick. There's something wrong already when you see this. They've let him wear an American Army general's uniform. That's crazy. Flown there in the command transport of General Walter Bedell Smith. You remember Beetle from the movie, right? In a series of secret meetings with the American staff, beginning with Alan Dulles, hello, and Wild Bill Donovan of the OSS, he laid out in detail the proposal, the surrender conditions, essentially what he was offering the Americans. Post war Europe, he pointed out, as everyone knew, was certain to become the arena of a confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union, ultimately even greater than the confrontation just ending between between the victorious allies and the vanquished Axis powers. The Soviets, he said, were well prepared for this new confrontation from an intelligence standpoint, as who better than he could say, and the Americans were not. The Russians had crack spy networks in Western Europe and America, but the Americans did not have a spy network of any kind or quality in Eastern Europe and Russia. Did that not put the Americans at an important disadvantage? Then, where and how could the Americans procure the needed capability? Recruiting and training a corps of Russian and Central European intelligence agents and building a network of reliable sources and experts nearly from scratch would take years, generations. The Americans agreed with Galen that they did not have that much time. I'm sorry, but I have to stop again because what kind of military intelligence were we talking about here? These people are saying they're afraid that the Soviets, immediately after World War II, are going to be in a position to strike further west into Western Europe. And there's nothing in any history that indicates they had that intention. That was all bullshit from Winston Churchill trying to get us engaged in this Cold War. And of course, John Foster Dulles, these corporate lawyers that are really in the pocket of the big banks, and the big banks all have been consolidated through Wall Street and the City of London. So Galen made an offer, did he? Yeah. And Roosevelt had said what now? He had said what? What was his terms for surrender again? Unconditional surrender. That's what I recall Roosevelt said. Unconditional surrender. But who are these officers that suddenly think, well, no, we're going to actually make a deal with the most despicable organization that ever existed on the planet, the fucking Nazis. Galen had a practical solution to this very problem. His own intelligence apparatus was still intact within the collapsing Hitler government. It was as capable as ever of delivering large masses of high quality intelligence on all aspects of Soviet life. Hitler had never taken advantage of this capability, Galen explained. Hitler had ignored Galen's organization and had gone on to ruin. Still, it was there. It might as well be put to better use. Galen's offer was for the Americans to pick up his organization bodily and bolt it into the empty space in their own intelligence system, as though it were one of the spoils of the war. Galen could plausibly guarantee his network's unmatched and unbending loyalty to the cause of anti Bolshevism, and the 52 crates he had buried in Misery Meadow were tangible proofs of his power and a foretaste of secret knowledge to come. All the Americans had to do was meet Galen's four conditions. First, Galen was to have complete autonomy within his organization and total control over its activities. The Americans would tell him what they wanted, and they would get it, satisfaction guaranteed, but they would have to know nothing about the process by which Galen got it to them. That knowledge was Galen's alone. He even reserved the right to approve U.S. liaison officers assigned to him. Second, the Americans would agree to use Galen only against the USSR and the East European satellites. Third, when a new German government was set up, the Americans would constitutionally install the Galen organization in it as its official Central Intelligence Agency and cancel automatically all outstanding Galen commitments to the United States. Fourth, the Americans would never require Galen to do anything he considered against German national interests. In the long and the short, our guys fell for it. Even as the United States was publicly proclaiming a policy of unconditional German surrender, Galen's incredible conditions were met, and his organization was being established at the very core and seat of the American system of foreign intelligence under the responsibility of Allen Dulles' secret intelligence branch of the OSS. By the time of the transformation of the OSS into the CIA in 1948, Galen had grown tight with Dulles, and his organization had become, in effect, the CIA's Department of Russian and East European Affairs. Soon after the formation of NATO, it became the official NATO intelligence organization. Did you hear that? NATO. Galen was running NATO's intelligence. Is that possibly how we got where we are today? And as per Galen's third condition, his organization was installed as the core and he as the director of the West German CIA, the Bundesnachrichtendienst. I thought it was Nachrichtendienst. Anyway, We need to go no further into the exploits of this last long improbable phase of Galen's career, save to note that it spans the Cold War, that it was current as of Watergate, and that Galen had to be pried out of a spy's retirement in 1974 to testify in the sensational West German spy scandal that brought down Willy Brandt. Look what power the victors conceded the vanquished. Exclusive purveyor of intelligence on the Soviet Union and East Europe to the United States, West Germany, and NATO. Galen and the spirit kept alive in him and his staff had more power over official American perceptions in the post war world than even a German victory could have given them. The Galen Vlassoff intelligence system had become a main source and the fountain of official American consciousness. Wow. Behold the span of this concatenation. First, in the time of Trotsky, there is General Vlassoff and his anti Bolshevist army and spy ring. The Vlassoff apparatus is then, at a certain later point, assimilated into the Galen apparatus. Then, just as the white Russian spies jumped to the Nazis when their own army went down, so now the German Nazi and Russian Tsarist spies together jumped to the American army as the Wehrmacht was falling. Vlassoff became a department of Galen. Then Galen became a department of Allen Dulles. This is how it came to pass that a Tsarist spy ring inside a Nazi spy ring took up the inner seats in the American foreign intelligence apparatus at the precise moment that this apparatus was starting to come forward as a major player in the great policy wars of Washington and the world. This is how it came to pass that everything official Washington would know about the Soviet Union and East Europe on most believable report, everything about the enemy our policymakers would most confidently believe would come by way of czarists and Nazis installed at the center of our national intelligence system. That was a buzzard that would come home to roost again and again. A buzzard, a phoenix program coming home to roost. Clandestinism, clandestinism, secret conspiracies, secret societies, hidden hands, noble lies. Clandestinism is a disease of Republican twilight. Its coming bespeaks the degeneration of the constitutional republic into the military empire. It worsens when the empire shakes, as in the Vietnam War America was shaken. In the American case, it does not arise from the mere accident of the Round Table's domination of the Foreign Service or FDR's ready capitulation to the syndicate extortion or the ideological gullibility of America's wartime espionage elite before the rational blandishments of a Nazi super spy. Rather, such accidents themselves were given significance by the larger transformation taking place around them, the dissolution of the wartime alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union, and the crystallizing in its place of the Cold War conflict between them. But one must always return to the specific events in which these larger forces unveiled themselves. Otherwise, we repeat the conservatives' error of assuming that state clandestinism results from the struggle against subversive terror instead of the struggle to maintain illegitimate state power. And the liberals' error of thinking that fascism is a result of the high technology era instead of the domination of this era by the activities of self serving power elites. I'm going to repeat that last because I think this is brilliant. We repeat, otherwise, we repeat the conservatives' error. The conservatives' error is to assume that state clandestinism results from the struggle against subversive terror. In other words, it's against Antifa, it's against the Proud Boys, it's, these subversive terrorists that are the reason that the conservative says that we have to have secrecy in our government, right? On the other hand, The liberals' error is thinking that fascism is a result of the high technology era instead of the domination of this era by the activities of self serving power elites. I can't improve on that. That's exactly the liberals' error. Now you see everyone's afraid of technology and the techno fascism, right? Techno fascism just means that the fascists are using technology. It doesn't mean that technology is inherently fascist. And so we make an error if we say that, that our technological society is just inevitably going to become a totalitarian state. No, it is the activities of self-serving power elites. The activities of self-serving power elites. So we all make mistakes. We all see things differently. And from what he calls the conservative point of view, the mistake is we think that state secrecy comes from the terrorism below, the radicals, the insurrectionists, to use a very current term, whereas the liberals think that fascism is an inevitable result of the improvement of our technology, the internet, the iPhone, instant messaging, GPS. It all looks like it's all just unfortunately going to fall into a technological fascist state, but doesn't have to. Who controls the internet? We the people or them the corporations? That's the question, isn't it? Tonight I'll be talking about my dad, Macduff Matters. I think I'm up to chapter 9 or so, and looking forward to seeing you then. I'll be concentrating tonight on his relationship with the CIA. Going to call it Macduff and the Spooks. See you then.